The Flatirons of Boulder have stood as silent, jagged sentinels for millennia, watching over a valley that has seen its fair share of gold rushes and ghost towns. But they have never witnessed a winter quite as cold or as transactional as the one currently settling over Folsom Field. There was a time, not so very long ago, perhaps a mere 18 months in our collective goldfish speed memory, when the arrival of Deion Sanders felt like the ultimate endgame, a singular lightning strike that would power the University of Colorado into the stratosphere of college football's elite. We were told that the prime effect was the new currency, a blend of charisma, Louis Vuitton luggage, and a social media reach that could dwarf small nations. We believed that the sheer gravitational pull of a legend could hold a roster together, that the aura of the man in the cowboy hat and gold chains was enough to keep the wolves of the transfer portal at bay. But as the snow begins to dust the peaks of the Rockies this December, a sobering reality is setting in across the Big 12 landscape. Charisma is a wonderful thing to have, but in the modern, cold-blooded theater of collegiate athletics, charisma is currently trading at a steep discount to liquid capital. The honeymoon period in Boulder hasn't just ended. It has been replaced by a balance sheet that is screaming for a savior. The news broke with the kind of rhythmic thud that fans in Boco have grown to dread. A 1-2 punch that felt less like a personnel change and more like a structural failure. First, it was Amarian Miller, the leading receiver of the 2025 campaign, the man who caught the lightning in a bottle when the offense needed a spark, announcing his intention to enter the transfer portal. Then came the second blow, perhaps even more visceral in its impact. Taufik Bayard, the safety who became the emotional heartbeat of the Buffalo's defense, was also looking for the exit. Bayard wasn't just a starter. He was a warrior who spent much of the autumn playing with what amounted to one working hand, a physical manifestation of the grit Sanders promised to instill in this program. If Miller was the flash, Bayard was the soul. And to see them both walking toward the door at the same time is to realize that the Prime brand is no longer a sufficient anchor. There is a deep, primal pain in this process, a gut reaction that wants to lash out and say that if a team can struggle to a 3-9 record with these stars, they can certainly find a way to replicate that failure without them. But the head knows better. The head understands that we are witnessing a talent drain driven not by a lack of loyalty, but by a lack of leverage. The head understands that Deion Sanders, for all his brilliance as a motivator and a marketer, is desperately in search of a sugar daddy this Christmas. To understand the desperation in Boulder, one must look at the neighbors who are currently renovating their mansions with private equity checks. The era of the celebrity coach, the era that CU helped define by hiring Coach Prime, has been eclipsed with startling speed by the era of the celebrity investor. While Colorado was counting its YouTube views and jersey sales, the rest of the Big 12 was learning how to speak the language of Wall Street and hedge funds. Look at Texas Tech, a program that was once a footnote in the shadow of the giants in Austin and College Station. Between July 2024 and July 2025, the Red Raiders didn't just recruit. They fundraised with the clinical efficiency of a political campaign, hauling in nearly $49 million for their student athletes. They didn't stop there. By early November, a new donor collective known as the Athletic Donor Circle had already pledged another $35 million. The result? Texas Tech didn't just improve. They bought the most efficient machine on the planet, steamrolling through a 12-1 season, capturing the Big 12 title, and securing a golden ticket to the college football playoff. They didn't do it with a silver-tongued coach alone. They did it with a war chest that made resistance feel futile. Then there is Utah, a program that has long been the gold standard for consistency and toughness under Kyle Whittingham. Last week, the Utes took the ultimate leap, becoming the first Power 4 athletic department to formally shake hands with the sharks of private equity. They partnered with Atro Capital, a New York-based firm that is reportedly ready to inject a staggering $400 million into the Salt Lake City machine. When Utah dismantled the Buffaloes 53-7 in late October, it wasn't just a win on the scoreboard. It was a demonstration of what a fully funded, professionalized operation looks like when it meets a program that is still trying to survive on hype and ticket sales. The Utes weren't just faster and stronger, they were more expensive. And in the Darwinian ecosystem of 2025, Expensive usually translates to better. The ledger for Colorado, meanwhile, is painted in a shade of red that would make a sunset over the Flatirons look pale. Multiple reports suggest the university is staring down a potential $27 million deficit for the 2025 to 2026 fiscal year. It is a staggering number, a fiscal cliff that is the direct result of the very things that made the program relevant again. Success in this broken system is a tax. Deion Sanders' salary rose by nearly $5 million for the upcoming year as his new extension kicked in, a reward for the visibility he brought to a dormant brand. But the House versus NCAA settlement has changed the math forever, requiring schools like CU to share revenues with the very players they used to call amateurs. This year, that cap sits at $20.5 million, a figure that is expected to climb by 4% annually. When you look at the math, it becomes clear why players like Miller and Byard are looking elsewhere. Why would a top-tier talent take a pay cut to stay in Boulder when the market rate for their services is being driven into the stratosphere by programs backed by New York private equity firms? The officials in Boulder aren't blind to this. They saw the freight train coming years ago, and they have scrambled to find every nickel hidden in the sofa cushions of Folsom Field. They've sold the naming rights to the indoor practice facility to Mountain State's Ford stores. They've ripped up the natural grass and replaced it with artificial turf so the stadium can host concerts and non-athletic events to keep the lights on. They are looking at jersey patches, a move UNLV recently leveraged into a $2.2 million annual deal as a way to stem the bleeding. But these are bandages on a bullet wound. You can sell all the Ford trucks and concert tickets you want, but you cannot compete with the $400 million influx of a firm like Atro Capital by selling more hot dogs and hats. The Buffaloes are trying to play high-stakes poker with a stack of chips they found in the parking lot, while the Red Raiders and the Utes are backed by the house. The tragedy of this moment is that college football has become a satire of itself. The system is fundamentally broken, a Frankenstein's monster stitched together by the greed of conference commissioners and the short-sightedness of university presidents who spent decades treating student athletes as indentured servants. We finally arrived at a free market for talent, a move that was decades overdue and morally necessary. But the pendulum hasn't just swung. It has detached from the clock and smashed through the window. Roster retention has become a myth. The traditional bowl games, once the sacred reward for a hard-fought season, have been reduced to 3-hour infomercials for regional companies and chambers of commerce that nobody outside of a 30-mile radius has ever heard of. They are programming blocks for Disney executives to fill the dead air between Christmas and New Year's, when established programs like Iowa State and Kansas State would rather pay $1 million fine to their league than participate in the bowl circus. You know the ship has not only sailed, it has sunk. Except, perhaps, for the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which has leaned so far into its own absurdity that it has become the only honest thing left in the sport. The fans, as always, are the ones left to pay for the wreckage. They are the casualties in a war where dollars have completely obliterated sense. Ticket prices are skyrocketing, and the point of entry fees just to sit in a plastic chair in the cold are reaching professional levels. The era of the all-access broadcast is ending, replaced by a pay-per-view model that will soon become the norm rather than the exception. The universities, faced with their own insolvency, are passing every cent of the cost down to the consumer, the very people whose passion built these brands in the first place. CU has vowed that they won't cut sports, but with only 13 non-football programs on the books, there isn't much left to cut. They've promised not to lop off student-athlete services, even though the athletic department already laid off track coaches last spring. Something has to give, and the pressure is mounting on the man at the top of the mountain. There is a nagging thought that lingers in the minds of those watching the budget balance. If Coach Prime truly wanted to stem the tide of defections, if he wanted to show the servant leadership he often preaches about, he could theoretically take half of his $10 million plus salary and inject it back into the revenue-sharing pool to keep his stars. It would be a gesture of unprecedented proportions, a move that would solidify his legend as a man who truly cares more about the young men than the bag. But we all know that isn't happening. This is a business, and Deion Sanders is a businessman who knows his worth.